At exactly 05:00 a.m. on September 12, 2025, a Russian armored column valued at over $50 million was advancing through Donetsk. This was a column of 20 T-90M tanks and BMP-3 vehicles. Fresh from a minor victory at Pokrovsk, the crews were operating in a state of relaxed non-urgency. Inside a T-90M, the commander was sipping coffee, his eyes on the GPS route, not the terrain. In the back of a following, BMP-3 troopers had their helmets off, listening to music. No one knew that just over a mile away, death was watching them through 10 separate pairs of thermal cameras. In a concealed bunker 2 miles away, the Ukrainian unit codenamed Spider's Trap was in the final seconds of launch preparation. Behind them, in shielded cases, were 50 DJI Mavic 3 drones, their batteries at 100% propellers pre-checked. These were not the primary weapon. They were electronic ghosts programmed to generate over 200 Phantom radar signatures upon launch. The real threat lay with the 10 Autel Evo 2 drones already airborne and the 30 TM-83 smart mines embedded beneath the concrete of the upcoming bridge. The Russian commander relied on his Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system backed by R-330Z jammers, but it wasn't enough. The Ukrainian plan was distributed redundant and AI-assisted. Any one drone could be lost, but the logic of the trap would remain intact. At 05:08 hours, as the lead T-90M's tracks bit into the bridge's concrete, the ambush was triggered. From concealed positions, 50 DJI Mavic 3 drones launched in a synchronized wave. Krasuka-4's radar screen clear moments before dissolved into a chaotic sea of over 200 hostile icons. The system's processor, paralyzed by the data flood, automatically flagged a mass attack. 20 miles away, an S-400 battery linked to the radar network fired $4 million missiles at digital ghosts. While Russia's premier air defense system engaged Phantoms, the real threats armed themselves. Below the bridge, a hardened data burst confirmed the 30 TM-83 mines were now live. Simultaneously, the 10 Autel Evo 2 hunter killers lifted off their AI navigation modules, ignoring the electronic chaos as they began their low-altitude approach. Inside the command T-90M, the Russian officer watched the swarm of Phantom contacts on his display with irritation, not alarm. To him, this was a nuisance, a primitive attempt at saturation that his systems were designed to defeat. He keyed his internal comms. EW is handling a drone swarm. Maintain formation. It's just toys. His confidence was rooted in the machine around him, a 52-ton fortress on tracks protected by relict explosive reactive armor and a 125mm main gun. Behind him, the BMP-3s, each armed with a 30mm autocannon, provided a secondary layer of firepower. His R-330Z Zytel jamming system was now at maximum power, broadcasting a 20-mile radius wall of electronic noise designed to sever the link between drones and their operators. On paper, it was the perfect counter, but every fortress has a flaw. The T-90M's flaw was its roof. The hastily welded cope cage was designed to stop grenades, not a dedicated top-attack munition with an armor-piercing warhead. And the column's most critical vulnerability was tactical. They were now fully committed to the 30-foot-wide bridge, a linear formation with no room to disperse, advance, or retreat. The T-90M was an arrogant giant, believing its heavy armor made it invincible. But Ukraine was not planning a frontal assault. They knew exactly where to strike the giant's two Achilles' heels from the sky above and from the earth below. This was not a battle of chance. It was an execution of a physics equation. The Ukrainian victory was predetermined by three critical factors that Russian doctrine had failed to account for. First, the mines. The 30 TM-83s were not placed randomly. Their positions were calculated using Starlink satellite imagery with a 3-foot margin of error directly beneath the bridge's primary load-bearing supports. Their purpose was not merely to damage the tank, but to generate a 50,000 psi overpressure wave designed to shatter the 10-inch thick reinforced concrete of the structure itself. Second, the data war. The 10 Autel Evo 2s were immune to Russia's electronic warfare. Instead of relying on jammable GPS, they used AI-powered terrain recognition and frequency-hopping data links, making them impervious to the R-330Z's brute force jamming. Simultaneously, the 50 Mavic 3 decoys generated over 300 false signals, creating what the Institute for the Study of War later termed a cognitive overload, effectively crashing the Russian command and control network. Finally, the physics of the kill. The strategy was a vertical pincer movement. While the mines were engineered to eliminate the floor, the Autel drones were armed with PG-7V warheads capable of penetrating over 20 inches of steel armor. The T-90Me's roof, its most vulnerable point, offered less than half that resistance. The Ukrainians had planned it like master tacticians turning a simple bridge into a tank-killing trap. The only variable left was the timing. At 05:09:30 hours, the plan encountered its first variable. One of the S-400 interceptors fired blindly into the Phantom swarm scored a direct hit on a Mavic 3 decoy. The drone's flaming wreckage spiraled down into a patch of dry grass bordering the road, igniting a rapidly spreading fire. The resulting thermal plume created a massive heat signature threatening to blind the thermal imaging sensors on the inbound Autel Evo 2s and degrade their terminal guidance accuracy. The Russians reacted. A nearby Lancet drone operator, spotting the heat-distorted outlines of the low-flying Autels, launched 2 of his own suicide drones to intercept. For a moment, it appeared Russia had an answer. But Ukrainian planners had anticipated this contingency. 2 of the 10 Autels, designated as Guardians, were not armed with anti-tank warheads. They broke formation and accelerated, deploying a kinetic interceptor system, a weighted net fired from an underbarrel launcher. The nets entangled both Lancets mid-flight, sending them tumbling harmlessly to the ground. On the bridge, the Russian commander was now witnessing a multi-domain nightmare. A Phantom missile attack, an S-400 firing on his flank, a grass fire obscuring his view, and a drone-on-drone dogfight. Overwhelmed by contradictory data and fearing an even more complex ambush, he made a fatal decision based on standard doctrine. He ordered the column to halt. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The TM-83 mines had a secondary trigger mechanism, seismic sensors. As the entire 800-ton mass of the column came to a dead stop, the sustained immense ground pressure crossed a preset threshold. In the Ukrainian bunker, a single green light illuminated on the main console, confirming the target was now perfectly static, perfectly centered, and had just armed the weapon that would annihilate it. At 05:10 hours, with the convoy static and the mines armed, the Ukrainian commander gave a single calm command: execute. The kinetic phase of the ambush began. The first Autel Evo 2 peeled away from its holding pattern, entering a steep terminal dive. It accelerated to its operational attack speed of 60 miles per hour, its camera locked on the geometric center of the lead T-90M's turret. Simultaneously, a second Autel executed an identical attack run on the last vehicle in the column, a BMP-3. This was the trapping maneuver, the violent closing of the vise. The FPV feed from the lead drone became a streaking monochrome blur, the tank's silhouette ballooning to fill the entire screen. The operator made a final 1-degree correction, ensuring the PG-7V warhead's impact point was directly above the ammunition carousel. At 05:10 hours, the first warhead struck. The shaped charge penetrated the T-90M's thin roof armor, detonating the 125mm propellant charges stored below. A catastrophic secondary explosion erupted, blowing the 12-ton turret a full 30 feet into the air before it crashed back down onto the bridge. 1 second later, the rear of the column was sealed by a similar fireball as the second drone struck the BMP-3, igniting its fuel and ammunition. The bridge now shuddered under the force of the internal detonations. The Russian convoy was no longer a military formation. It was a linear, burning death trap bookended by fire with nowhere to go. On the main tactical display in the Ukrainian bunker, the icon for the TM-83 mine network began to flash. The final countdown was initiated. The primary detonation was now 45 seconds away. At 05:11 hours, the timer reached 0. The 30 TM-83 mines detonated simultaneously. It was not a conventional explosion. It was a catastrophic structural failure event. The 50,000 psi overpressure wave did not just push, it pulverized the bridge's reinforced concrete supports from below. The 300-foot bridge collapsed into the riverbed, shattered by the shockwave. As the structure gave way, the remaining 8 Autel Evo 2 drones commenced their terminal attacks. They did not target the falling vehicles. They targeted the internal compartments, their PG-7V warheads striking engine bays and ammunition storage sections mid-air. The FPV camera feed from the last drone captured the scene. A hellscape of falling burning metal descending into the chasm where the bridge had been moments before. A single fireball, likely a T-90M's full ammunition load, illuminated the pre-dawn sky, reaching an altitude of over 100 feet before the feed cut to static. The destruction was a sequence of planned synergistic failures. The initial blast from the TM-83 mines created the kinetic event, dropping the 1,000-ton column into the riverbed. A conventional artillery strike would have required hundreds of shells and given minutes of warning. This was instantaneous and total. The primary destructive force, however, came from the convoy itself. The Autel drones acted as chemical and thermal triggers. Each warhead that penetrated a vehicle's armor initiated a secondary and far more violent detonation. The propellant from 125mm tank shells and the fuel from the vehicle's 10-ton diesel reserves ignited, creating a sustained 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit from diesel and ammo. The overpressure waves from these internal explosions met and amplified each other, tearing the vehicles apart from the inside out. The final tally was a textbook example of asymmetric warfare efficiency. 18 of the 20 vehicles, representing over $40 million in Russian hardware, were confirmed destroyed for a Ukrainian expenditure of less than $150,000. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The Russian S-400 battery that had fired on the Phantom Swarm reported 4 successful intercepts, just as radio channels were flooded with panicked, unintelligible screams from the now non-existent column. For several critical minutes, Russian Sector Command was operationally blind, receiving contradictory reports of a massive missile attack and the complete loss of a lead armored unit. Within hours, the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Directorate released the drone footage. The high-resolution video of the bridge's disintegration went viral, a stark and undeniable contradiction to the Russian Ministry of Defense's official statement, which claimed a sabotage attempt on a transport route was repelled with minor equipment damage. The strategic impact was immediate and profound. Post-incident satellite imagery confirmed the bridge was completely gone. A subsequent report from the Royal United Services Institute verified that this single act had severed the primary logistical artery for the Pokrovsk axis, halting the entire Russian advance for a minimum of 3 weeks, as engineering corps struggled to find or build a viable alternative route. A panic order was issued from the Russian High Command. All offensive ground movements in the sector were to halt immediately pending inspection of all bridges, culverts, and underpasses. The attack did more than just destroy hardware. It injected a crippling dose of paranoia into Russian operational planning. Every piece of civilian infrastructure was now a potential death trap. The Spider's Trap had not just won a battle. It had successfully weaponized the Russian army's own arrogance against itself, grinding its momentum to a dead halt. The ultimate lesson from the Donetsk dance floor is not about drones or mines. It is about the new strategic equation of the 21st century battlefield. It proves that a small, intelligent, and technologically agile force can systematically dismantle a larger, more powerful conventional army by targeting its most critical vulnerability, its rigid, predictable doctrine. Russia brought a $50 million sledgehammer to the fight. Ukraine brought a calculator, a deep understanding of psychology.